I was raised very black and white, which I think a lot of today's generation of parents were raised that way. And so we expect things to be able to go that way, that it's tit for tat. It's you do this, I scratch your back, you scratch mine. But sometimes that just isn't working because this world is so different. And that's not an excuse. That's a reality that the world is very different.
Hi, Trusty Herd. This is the Not By Chance podcast. We welcome you here today. Here in this podcast, we spotlight the latest in teen treatment and help parents understand how they can keep the momentum once they get home again. For today's podcast, we're going to talk about when your teen stops caring and consequences don't work. So with that, Roxanne, I'm really grateful that you're here. She's been on the front lines with me in both parenting and in our organization at Trusty and previous organizations. So she's a wealth of knowledge as well. I'm looking forward to having a conversation with her today.
We're excited to be talking about this topic because it's not just for parents who have kids in treatment. It's for all parents with every single one of your children at different points in their life. And I'm even going to bring in some stuff with young adults that I think will be helpful in how we've seen these principles work for them as well.
So parents, if you've ever heard yourself think or heard yourself say to another person, I could take away every single freedom he has and it still would not change him. It would not work. You're not alone. You're not crazy. It gets to a point in a relationship dynamic or with the mental health of a teen that those dynamics happen where we feel powerless. And that go-to tool that we've used in the past might wake them up and say, okay, I want that freedom back. That doesn't now work. And I've heard that so many times over the years. And in the past, we've had some good answers to that, some things that we're going to share with you today. But at the end of the conversation today, I want you to make sure you stay tuned because we're going to share with you a tool that I really think is paradigm shifting. And it will make this change that we're going to talk about, which is essentially changing the dynamic and the pattern you have going with your teen, it'll make it almost automatic. So make sure you stick around for the end of this as we disclose what that tool is, that new thing that we've created. So Roxanne, let's talk a little bit about why consequences at some point, sometimes they just don't work. And you literally could take everything away and it would not motivate the teen. It would not change their behavior. It would not make them feel better. Why do you think that tends to happen? How do we get there?
Well, I think it's through practice, like we've done it. And then we see this isn't working, this isn't going anywhere. And we're shocked, like every tool in our tool belt has been used. We've talked to our friends about it. They're facing the same situations with their kids, maybe a little bit different details to their story. But we get to this point where we are, as parents, just flabbergasted. I mean, first of all, we don't really remember everything about our childhoods. We think that we do, but that's one of the things I think that most parents are struggling with today is that they're thinking, I would have never gotten away with this as a kid. My dad would have kicked my rear end so hard, or whatever. We think that there's just a totally different situation now, and parents are absolutely right. It's a very different situation now.
That's right. I think maybe a good foundation for this conversation is to go back and think about what are teens going through today that gets them to the point where they emotionally shut down and literally don't care if you take away all their freedoms.
This reminds me, if I can just jump in here, we were in Africa and we were with a teenage kid and my son asked this kid who'd spent all day traveling around with us, if you were to give us a name, what would it be? And he named each one of us. And he turned to me and he says, you would be this. And he said some name. And I said, well, what does it mean? He says, it means the governor. And I'm like, why can't it be like Pretty Flower or something like that? But I have this reputation in the family, and he could see that I was very strict and we're on time, and these are the things that we do, and you stick to your word when you say you're going to do something. And so I was raised very black and white, which I think a lot of parents were raised, of today's generation of parents were raised that way. And so we expect things to be able to go that way, that it's tit for tat. It's you do this, I scratch your back, you scratch mine. But sometimes that just isn't working because this world is so different. And that's not an excuse. That's a reality that the world is very different.
Yes. Over the years, as I've worked in the teen treatment field, I've heard progressively that things they'll talk about as they talk about the teens coming into these programs, they would talk about them as very complex and more and more and more complex over time. And my thought is, yes, they are, because they're being raised in a very complex world with a lot of problems that come with that complexity. You know, you think about what a teen is dealing with today that they weren't even 10 years ago, certainly 15, 20 years ago before the cell phone. It was simpler and it was easier to navigate. These days, it is incredibly complex. So if your teen is shutting down emotionally, that they're doing the best they can in most cases.
Yeah, I think about that again. It's very easy to reject this idea that the world is more complex, and you think, no, kids are just lazier, or they're just not out in the sunshine like they need to be. And some of that is true. I absolutely believe that the world has changed and they're not doing some of the things that would make them feel better. But if you think about what is served up on their phones every day, it's not just comparison. It's not just a feeling of being left out and not belonging. It's also some really scary, dark things, some really scary thoughts and philosophies that are being served up to our kids as normal. And then our children are trying to handle these very heavy things that our parents carried for us in years past, and they're trying to process it, and they're trying to decide, is this my value? Is this what I believe? Is this how I should be handling my problems? This is how I should feel. I should bully others because I'm being bullied. You know, it really is complex. And if we're not intentional, which is what this podcast is about, by the way, if we are leaving things to chance, then there's a really good chance our kids are going to struggle mentally, emotionally, physically.
No wonder they can shut down.
That's right.
And get to a point where they say, what's the use? Or what can I do? It's too much for me. And so as a protective mechanism, it's almost like I don't care is maybe a better way to say than I can't handle what's going on.
Yeah.
So to start to not to care. There's another thing that happens though too, and this is just wired into all of us as children as we age and get up to the adolescent years. We're wired to become autonomous, to have autonomy in our life, to make decisions for ourselves. So you've got this recipe going on where you've got this complex world that teens are being raised in. They're naturally going to struggle. That's going to happen because it's hard. And with that struggle, there's going to be a lot of emotions triggered in them. There's going to be some behaviors that, of course, we want to clamp down on as parents. We want to, address those issues so we may take things away from them. And in the process, maybe we don't do it the very best way we could. We may be inconsistent. I know for myself, one of my problems as a parent has been at times when in anger or frustration, I will maybe take something away. And then afterwards realize that it was irrational at the moment, and so I backtrack on that and then give in. And so now I'm creating this scenario where there's a lot of inconsistency. First of all, the emotion creates inconsistency. Like it doesn't feel safe if that's happening. That's not an environment that you can feel safe in. And then if things are shifting and changing and all of that, I'm creating even more complexity for my child. So you can have either one of those scenarios be at the heart of why the teen, consequences don't work anymore. It might be that they're emotionally shut down and they really just are so depressed and anxious, and that's kind of the only place they can go. It has no effect. Or they're trying to have some control in their life. So out of defiance, they're kind of saying, no, it doesn't matter what you do. It's not going to affect me.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier, Tim, about how as parents, we have these two sides that we are trying to blend at all times, and we feel like we're failing on either side. Sometimes our reaction is just to throw our hands up in despair and say, I don't know. I'm just going to walk away, and hopefully over the next 2 or 3 days, things will simmer down and we'll figure it out later. Like maybe they'll grow up in that time, or the problem will just disappear because we just have been using the same tool that's still not working. And so that's one side of this laissez-faire parenting. And then the other side is the over-parenting, the over-consequencing, the overreacting. And we look at each other and say, wait, I wasn't going to be this kind of parent. Back at What to Expect When You're Expecting, and you're reading that book, you think, I can do this. It's just a plan. I just follow it. And then the complexity comes in, then the personalities, then the diagnoses, then the life events that change everything. And you are caught unaware and your plan went out the window. But that shouldn't cause a lack of hope. That shouldn't make you feel like it's never going to get better. There is hope. There are strategies. There are things that we're going to talk about today that can really help parents get out of that stuck negative cycle with their child.
Mm-hmm. You know, when we're stuck and we're struggling as a parent, and we really have tried to do everything we can think of, we might think that we're not just using the same tool all the time. You know, we literally might think, okay, I tried consequencing, I tried not consequencing, giving them more freedom, and that's not working. So you kind of feel like you've gone both the full spectrum of options out there. But deep down, if you go down another layer in the onion of what's actually going on in the family system, it's just another mechanism in maybe in the dynamic between you and your teen that feels to the teen that they don't have control, that they, that everything's kind of chaotic and they can't really trust what's going on. And so that dynamic is it feels different, but really it feels like more of the same to the teen. So what we want to talk about now is what's the shift that can make a difference? What's the difference that can make a difference? It's got to be at a lower level than just some behavioral change. And what we want to talk about next is that it really starts with me as the parent, or you.
I know, such a shocker. We say it all the time, but we have to say it all the time because we forget it all the time. That when we start to externalize the problem outside of ourselves, we don't see ourselves as a part of it. We see them as the problem. Mm-hmm. We need to be reminded that we absolutely have a role in this, and that should give us hope.
Yeah, it's nice to know that there is some influence, and if we can have the influence on ourselves, that's a great beginning. And so, yeah, let's start out by saying the problem is not my child or my teenager. The problem is maybe, yes, they might have a diagnosis, they might have challenges and all of that, but the part of the problem that I can make a difference on actually is happening between us. And my half of that is something I can work on and focus on.
I think this would be a good place for you to describe this cartoon that you've used in many presentations over the years, but if you can do that visually for our listeners.
It's just a cartoon of a parent and a son, a father and a son. And the father is at first looking at the son, and under the son it says problem. And under his picture it says solver. And he sees himself as the solver and his son as the problem. And if we're in that state, we're going to come across very differently than if we make the next shift that we're proposing here, is that we, instead of create the power struggle that happens in that scenario, we want to create a partnership. So from power struggle to partnership. And what you see in the next slide in our presentation with the cartoon is that you've got the father and the son now together in the same frame, and both of them have the solver label under it, and the problem is outside. And so now they're together looking at the problem to want to solve it. I think if your teen was really honest and they could be open with someone and they asked them, do you like what's going on right now? Do you feel good? Do you like the relationship dynamic that's going on between you and your parent? They'd probably say no. They might like having full reign and being able to do the things they want, and they don't want that to change necessarily because it's going to require a lot more from them if they're not being able to kind of cope with life the way they're doing it. But they would prefer things are better with their family and with their parents. So shift that paradigm a little bit and see yourselves together against the problem, which is, in this case, the dynamic between you and the teenager.
I had this thought yesterday. I was looking at a little icon of collaboration, and it was a handshake. And I thought, what is it when we are in a power struggle? It's not a handshake. It's more like a thumb war, where we've pulled out, we're pulling away from each other, and we're trying to avoid each other, and we're struggling to get on top and be the one in charge and have our way. And that's just not going to work. But as you move closer into a handshake, into that clasp, then it feels collaborative. It feels like we're friends. That whole idea of the reason the handshake started, and this could totally be myth, but it was to show that you weren't holding a weapon in your hand. And that's why you came forward to someone with an open palm, to show that it was safe. And I feel like that is kind of a great visual before we go into this with our teen when we're in a stuck situation. Let's talk about how we can come to this without weapons, without threats, without rebellion, and see how we can make this a partnership.
Yes, if you see the teen as a problem, you're wondering, what more do I need to do to change that person? How do I motivate them? How do I, change their strategies of how they're dealing with their life right now, or how they're handling just the basic chores that they need to do? If they're part of the solution, though, and we see them as part of the solution, everything kind of changes. All kinds of new ideas can come to us if we see them that way.
I have a recent story as of yesterday morning. So we have a son who's trying to find work, and it's very difficult right now, and he needs to get paid a lot more than he's getting paid at his part-time job. And he came home the other day saying, I have applied to 60 different places, and I don't know what I'm doing wrong. You wrote my resume, Mom. I've been interviewing for years. Everything seems to, not for years, but he's very well-spoken and has taught for years, and he's not getting this interview, and he was feeling very frustrated. I really didn't know what else to say to him, but for the last few months, I've been like, are you really trying? Are you only applying for the high-paying positions that you aren't qualified for? What's the problem here? But I decided to take a different tactic yesterday, and I had come across this quote that I shared with him, and it changed everything. It's by Dr. Frank H. Roberts of the University of Denver, and this was like in the early 1900s that he said this, but he said, make every occasion a great occasion, for you know not when fate is taking your measure for a higher and better position in life. And so I said, hey, I just want to share this with you. Just think about this. Make every occasion a great occasion, for you know not when fate is taking your measure for a higher and better position in life. And he was quiet for a second, then he said, can you text that to me? And I thought, oh, this is the opening. And so we together looked at the situation and said, you are doing a lot of good things. You have prepared yourself in many good ways. You are really putting yourself out there, and something is coming. It's just not in your timetable. So let's just keep working at it, and together we'll keep talking to people. I ran into someone who knew him as a child, and I said, hey, if you know of anybody looking for a bright, shiny kid to work for them, So I was putting things out there, trying to help him. And it was really awesome to feel partnered in his unemployment situation, or his underemployment situation.
Contrast that between the two a little bit more clearly.
Yeah.
Like, how did that feel compared to, what does it feel like if you're not doing that?
Yeah, so before, I'm just discouraged. I'm just frustrated with him. I'm thinking, everybody else can find a job, why can't you? But when I was in this with him, after this one quote changed my thinking, and I thought, oh, we're getting ready for something better. You're not just stagnant. You're actually prepping for something bigger and better in life, all of a sudden it was fun. We were friends. We were hopeful. Mm-hmm. And I have no doubt he's going to find a job.
Well, and in that moment, you were seeing strengths in him.
Yeah.
You were seeing what he had to offer, because now you're partnering and you're seeing all the positive aspects. Once we take the problem label off the teenager, now we can actually see things that normally would go completely unnoticed. That's one of the big challenges for teens when we're stuck in a cycle with them, is they start to feel like nothing they do matters or will make a difference because they still see me in the same way. And we've told this story before. I'm not going to really share all of it, but there's been things with my kids in the past that have become so obsessive. The problem label has been so stuck on them in my mind that that's all I saw. I was not seeing all the other things going on. And, it wasn't long ago, just a month or two ago, you and I noticed something, because we're not seeing him as a problem. We're noticing things he's doing that's different, one of our sons, that's very different than maybe in the past. And it was a simple thing, but the hose out by the garden was all wrapped up nice in a nice coil on the ground. And that was different than what we'd normally see. And I think we probably would have missed it had we been focused on just the problems. Mm-hmm. So step one in this process is that we have to see them in a different light. We also then have to see ourselves as part of the problem. What have we been doing in the past that's just contributed to this negative cycle of us both being stuck, so that we can try something very different.
Yeah, and I just want to make a shout out to the home team here. And I also want to say, I mentioned at the beginning, I wanted to talk about young adults a little bit, because young adults are never done being parented either. I am 55 and I want my mom, who's been gone for 5 years. I need her parenting advice and help. But I was talking to our daughter who is going to have a baby, and she met with her midwife, and this baby had been breech, and the midwife had to push on her stomach and turn and try to get this baby to somersault so it was head down, getting ready for delivery. And the midwife was talking to the assistant midwife, and she said something about, are you going to be okay? Are you prepping for this, non-medicated birth? And she was saying yes. And the midwife said, oh, you should have seen how strong she was when I had to flip this baby. She was not medicated and we did it. She's tough. And my daughter came home and said, Mom, it was so nice to hear that she thought that. This midwife has delivered over 5,000 babies. Like, she thought that of me. And I thought, there is no way I could have said anything that would have made her believe that she had the strength to deliver this baby like that midwife could. Mm-hmm. And so again, as a home team member, if you notice something, open your mouth and share it. As a parent, if you know that your child admires someone, let them know, my child admires you or appreciates you or thinks you're cool. Can you just look for a way to reach out and encourage? And oh my goodness, it's something that will change their lives. Mm-hmm. Just one sweet comment can change a life.
Absolutely. Yes. And, that is a different topic, a home team, but that's a great example of someone not stuck in a mindset about, our daughter in this case, that kept her from being able to see the strengths. So that's a huge step. Focus on what you want more of. Look for it. Look for the exceptions. Make that your primary goal when you see them, instead of, is the problem still occurring? Think about what is going well. What's the thing that's happening in their life that if I focused on it more, I'd have a better feeling about them. And so they can feel it. I mean, somehow we cannot hide how we feel, and judgments that might just be in our head. We cannot hide that from our teens. They will sense it, and ultimately the cycle continues because we haven't actually fundamentally changed the way we see them.
They will either see it in your eyes or they will see it in the avoidance of your eyes. Mm-hmm. They read it very well, very quickly.
That's right. So we're looking for little small wins here. Another major paradigm, now this is the big one that we wanted to share with you, that the tool that we're creating right now. I've mentioned it, I believe, in some other podcasts, but it's finally ready for you to come out and try it. This tool actually kind of started to take shape when I was in the home of a family whose teens had come back from treatment programs, and they were very focused on getting a home contract in place so that there could be clear expectations for their boys, post-treatment. And, in the past, I thought that way too, like, okay, we got to get those non-negotiable things nailed down. We've got to have preset consequences really clear for them so they understand what's going to be expected, what the downside of falling back into those old behaviors is going to be. But before that, I started to see how these kids, these teenage boys, were so triggered by the word home contract. I mean, incredibly triggered. By the way, I did a podcast not long ago with a young woman who's now a teen mentor. She does coaching for teens who are coming out of treatment programs. And she'd been through a program herself, and she basically said, yeah, I mean, the first thing you want to do is sort of reject that, get away from that contract, get away from those, consequences and, your parents telling you what you need to do and all of that. So I saw that dynamic was very possible, that it wasn't going to go very far. And so I did something completely different. I had a worksheet, I had created this worksheet, and I had the parents go in the back room, and I just spent some time with the boys, and I said, hey, you kind of know what your parents worried about, what they, their biggest concerns are. You also know what you want, the kind of the freedoms you hope you can get, the independence you're trying to get at some point. And there needs to be sort of a building of trust that happens so your parents can legitimately give you those freedoms that you want. Instead of having your parents kind of do that and create a plan for that, I'm going to ask you to do that. And I'm going to walk you through this worksheet. And it was things like, okay, what do you want? What is the freedom that you really want? All right, what's the barrier to you getting that freedom? What are the challenges that you've had in the past around that freedom? Your parents have probably told you what their worries are if you were to have that level of freedom. What are they? And so step by step, I walked them through this process. And it only took us an hour and a half or so, and then we invited the parents back in, and we said, hey, instead of the old method we've used in the past, your boys are going to share with you their recommendation, their plan to earn trust enough so they can have the freedoms that they want. And so this is a proposal meeting, essentially. We're going to share that with you. And I sat and watched as the boys shared it with their parents, and it was so fun to see the expressions on the parents' face, because the boys had stepped up. They had thought about this from a very wise perspective. They were also able to express, hey, I see why you would struggle with this in the past because of these past issues and behaviors that we've had. I mean, we went to treatment for a reason, but this is what we want, and this is what we do, what we're willing to do. What do you think? And with there was very little adjustment to the proposal, probably because I'm a parent and I'm kind of guiding them a little bit, but ultimately it was their plan. All I saw was these, expressions of surprise and almost their mouth open, like, are you really able to think like this? Are you really able to, propose something that we agree with, instead of having this clashing that normally would happen? And to the boys, it was this breath of fresh air. It's like, we get to make some decisions.
Yeah.
We get to propose something. Yeah, we're going to put our best foot forward, but because we do want this freedom. And so it was just an amazing kind of paradigm shift. And I kind of wondered why I had not stumbled onto this sooner. And I think it is because all the work that I've done with families and our team has done in the past, we have been so tied into their process and so in touch with them and reminding them and following through and helping the plan actually be followed, troubleshooting when there was resistance. And so we never really saw it fail like it normally does. Another thing that happened just a few weeks ago was a new parent group, and this is a group that most of them had their child home before we actually started the group itself. And the topic came up of these home contracts or the transition plan. And one father said, and it's like the ultimate quote because all of the parents who had their teen home by that point were nodding in agreement as he said it. He said, "My son has been home," oh, here we go. Here it is exactly. "Our son has been home 1 month now, and it's been at least 3 weeks since we've even looked at the plan that we spent hours creating before discharge. Now he doesn't want to revisit it, saying, 'That was for way back when I first got home.'" And we kind of laughed about that last part, but we all of the parents were nodding. "That's exactly what's going on in my home," they said. And so that's not what happened in this case that I just shared with you. What happened in that case is that because it was the teen's plan, they had ownership. They had agreement from their parents that there would be this reward at the end if they could follow through, because that essentially says, I'm mature enough because I'm now just truly demonstrating this maturity over a little period of time to qualify for this freedom. And it was just awesome. So what's come out of that is what we're calling the Trust and Freedom Recovery Tool. And this is an AI-supported coaching. Instead of me being in the front room helping the teens do it through a worksheet, it's the AI coach that we've trained to walk them through a series of steps in answering some questions and ultimately creating a plan that is proposed to the parents. And it's really kind of exciting because if you're stuck in this place of saying, you know, we could take away everything and it wouldn't matter, my guess is there's something that if you change the whole style of the way you're dealing with this, instead of saying, you know, there's the consequences and these freedoms that you can't have until X, Y, and Z happens, we want to flip that whole script and put the teen in charge of creating a plan that would qualify them for that thing. So it's been an effort to get it to this point, but it's now ready for you to try.
Yeah. So what would you say to parents who say, well, I don't want an AI coach in the middle of this?
Well, I would just say, well, you know, when I presented this actually at a boot camp, kind of a startup boot camp idea, because almost none of those people were in the category of parents I'm talking about. And that is a parent that has tried to address the issues in lots of different ways and at this point are struggling to even communicate about it. They didn't see the point of it. And I said, and they had that same question, like, I wouldn't want to
turn my kid over.
I wouldn't want to turn my kid over to an AI. I want to be the one to talk to them about it. And of course, these were like 22-year-olds that didn't have a teenager that gotten to that point where there was an impasse. Mm-hmm. In this case, you know, we've trained the AI to be very respectful, to bring up some of the concerns the parent has potentially if they give them approval to do it, but to do it in a way that's non-judgmental and open and ultimately just really facilitating the words, the actual plan itself from the teenager. So at the end of the process, the teen says, yes, I agree to that plan. That's what I want, before it is sent over to the parent.
And I think the thing that's fun here is because we've tested it over and over is you can be as snarky as you want to that AI. It just says, hey, no problem. We can adjust that. And with a parent, it would have shut it down immediately. Like the whole process would be over. But because it was an AI who you couldn't hurt its feelings, it just kept working the plan.
Yeah, and I think a lot of teens are used to using AI as well. Too. And it's, you know, they understand what it is. And And so we're excited to be able to present it. You can find this tool at trustandfreedom.trusty with 2 Y's.com.
Spell out and, so it's trustandfreedom.trusty.com.
Thank you. Yes. And give it a shot. I guarantee you it will change. It will be a very different way to address the problems. And it's starting with you identifying a freedom or reward that your teen wants. And ultimately you send them a text. It has the link in it so that they can go there and start having this conversation. But right in the text, it'll say, have this short conversation with AI for a 7-day plan in order to get, this freedom or reward that I, as your parent, am ready to, consider if you can do it. So this changes the game. I invite you to do it. I'd love your feedback. I'd like your thoughts about what was like. What did your teen say? How did it go for them? We're still adjusting it and making it better and better.
And you can send us that feedback at hello@trusty.com. But I think the thing that we haven't even mentioned, which is the greatest part, so yes, it's collaborative, it's actually helpful, but it's free.
Yeah.
So there is no barrier. Give it a shot. Give it to your sister-in-law who's struggling. Whoever could need this, give it a try. We're really excited about this. I think that you will be too.
Good point. It is free. There's an option at the end where if you want to have it plugged into the Trusty app where that plan can actually be facilitated over a 7-day period, then you can do that. But at the very least, you get a letter, very collaborative. We're talking about moving from power struggle to a partnership. This is where it starts to look like a partnership. You might be wondering, do I have to accept everything that my teen brings to me through this process? And the answer is no, because we want you ultimately as the parent to be able to edit it if you need to, or give feedback to your teen and let them edit their plan. So in the end, they own it, but you're sort of approving the plan.
Well, we just want to thank all of you for being here. We know your time is precious, and we just applaud you for being so intentional in your family. And I think that this tool is going to be the next step for you. So check it out at trustandfreedom.trusty.com.
Thanks for joining us today, and we wish you all the best as you change the dynamic around freedoms and consequences and trust. I think you can actually see trust improve in just 7 days if you stay focused on it.